Good to have you back. This is Environmental Intelligence, episode 48 for June 23rd, 2026, your briefing on environmental, regulatory, science, and compliance developments that matter for Canadian professionals. Ontario legislator requests provincial review of new Windsor concrete plant air emissions under EPA framework. An Ontario legislator has urged examination of a new concrete facility backed by the Moroun family, citing potential air quality impacts near residential areas. LNG Canada has applied for a significant increase in flaring volumes at its Kitimat facility. The federal government has committed $21.6 million toward a renewable microgrid project in northern Manitoba. Practitioners should monitor these provincial and federal developments for project-specific compliance implications this week. If you only note one thing today for your compliance calendar, Ontario is examining air emissions for a new concrete operation in Windsor under the EPA, assess potential cumulative air quality modeling requirements for similar industrial proposals near the border, and monitor for formal provincial response or permit filings. The lead story today is the Ontario request for closer scrutiny of the Windsor concrete plant. A provincial legislator has called on the government to examine the facility, citing deep concern over air pollution and health effects on nearby residents. The project expands industrial activity in an area already influenced by cross-border infrastructure, including the Ambassador Bridge. No specific regulatory instrument or threshold change has been proposed yet, but the request signals potential future scrutiny under the Ontario EPA for particulate and combustion emissions. Consultants managing air dispersion modeling or environmental approvals for similar aggregate and concrete projects should track whether this leads to enhanced baseline monitoring requirements or cumulative effects assessments. Next steps will likely involve formal correspondence with the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. In Regulatory and Policy Watch, LNG Canada has applied to increase permitted flaring volumes at its Kitimat facility due to ongoing technical issues. This request engages British Columbia permitting processes for upstream oil and gas operations and may affect airshed compliance in the region. Operators and consultants should review the application details for implications on existing emission caps and monitoring programs. Separately, the federal government has committed funding to support a renewable energy microgrid in northern Manitoba. The investment targets remote community energy systems and carries implications for federal clean energy programming under existing climate and energy frameworks. In Science and Technical, a long-term grassland experiment examined multiple global change factors together. Elevated temperature and elevated CO2 together raised total below-ground carbon allocation as the experiment progressed through time. Drought conditions and nitrogen addition each altered the size of that increase. The combined interactions produced larger effects on carbon allocation than single-factor changes alone. Results point to the need for updated soil carbon models that incorporate interacting drivers rather than isolated variables. Such models feed directly into risk assessments and site closure criteria applied under provincial frameworks such as BC CSR and Alberta EPEA. In industry and practice, federal funding supports deployment of a renewable microgrid serving remote northern communities. The commitment totals $21.6 million for the first of its kind project in northern Manitoba. The microgrid integrates distributed renewable generation to serve communities that currently rely on other energy sources. Practitioners involved in energy infrastructure projects in Manitoba should note the precedent for integrating distributed renewables into existing regulatory approvals under the Manitoba Environment Act. The approach demonstrates how federal clean energy investments can align with provincial permitting pathways for remote systems. Project details highlight opportunities for similar configurations where grid extension remains impractical. There is a nuance here worth understanding when scoping air quality work for a proposed concrete batch plant adjacent to an existing border crossing and rail corridor. The Phase 1 has flagged potential overlap with existing combustion sources, yet no formal cumulative assessment trigger appears in the initial permit checklist. Under Ontario EPA approvals, the ministry retains discretion to require combined effects modeling even when individual source contributions fall below screening thresholds. Experienced practitioners recognize that residential receptors within 500 meters often drive the need for refined dispersion runs using site-specific meteorological data rather than conservative defaults. Regulators increasingly expect explicit justification for excluding nearby sources, particularly when public correspondence has already highlighted health concerns. The mistake I see most often is assuming that meeting individual source emission limits satisfies the cumulative obligation. The fix is to document the rationale for source inclusion or exclusion in the initial modeling plan submitted with the application. If you are working on industrial approvals in Ontario, review EPA air emissions guidance for implications on new concrete and aggregate facilities in southwestern Ontario. Monitor the BC flaring permit application status for LNG Canada and assess downstream effects on regional monitoring networks. Brief clients on federal renewable microgrid funding eligibility for remote Manitoba projects. Update internal checklists to capture potential cumulative air quality requirements when new industrial proposals are located near existing infrastructure. Mark your calendar for the ongoing BC review of the LNG Canada flaring permit increase application and the Ontario Ministry response to the legislator request regarding the Windsor concrete facility. Also monitor federal clean energy funding announcements for additional Manitoba or remote community project opportunities. Tomorrow, watch for further developments on the Ontario EPA air emissions review for the Windsor facility. That covers today's environmental intelligence. If you found this useful, share it with a colleague who needs to stay current. We'll be back with the next briefing. And before you go, this show is part of the NAIR Network, a family of daily podcasts covering tech, science, markets, and more. If you enjoyed today's episode, give Planetarian Daily a listen. Daily breakthroughs in science, health, and longevity. You can explore the whole lineup at neuranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.